I'm going to be talking about narrative structures, structuralism, and equilibrium in beginnings and endings. So, narratives or stories are a basic way of making sense of our experiences. It's a sequence of events taking place over a given period of time that are linked mainly through cause and effect. So, the way a story is told or structured is basically how it will affect, and it'll affect how it's understood by the audience. So, structuralism is a method of analysis that involves looking for and examining the underlying structures of meaning and language, social relationships, narratives, and so forth. So, structuralism is basically how the structure of the film is set up through beginnings and endings. So, narrative structure is driven by questions and answers that hook the audience into the narrative. And it's constructed of major questions and opinions that will eventually be answered through the conclusion or the ending. So an example of narrative structure is gays in film, and how back when they were first introduced into film, they were often portrayed as a negative thing, and most of the time would have a very bad negative ending in movies. So that's one example of that. So the beginning of the film sets up the structure for the entire movie. So also endings are a critical part where we see how the character's journey concludes and how the character develops through the entire story. So there are many different types of endings that can change our entire view of a character. There are many different ways that films can end that can alter the way we view the film. So an example of this is in Marvel, and how in most Marvel movies, they're known for putting a little short clip after the movie's finished that'll lead into the sequel. A lot of times giving like a little hooker at the end that'll like hook the audience to want to see the next movie. Or another example is in Harry Potter, how the character Snape, his development, not through just only the first movie, but in the whole series. In the beginning of the series, we see him as a more negative character, like an antagonist, but then through his character development through the movie, we see him actually like looking out for Harry and wanting his best interest, and we see him in a more positive light compared to how he's viewed more negatively in the beginning of the movie. So the equilibrium is established at the end and is usually a form of resolution of the questions and desires that have been introduced throughout the film. So how this works, the setup of it is there's a stable situation, and then we have the disruption, which is where the questions, the desires, the goals from the movie come in for the main character. And then the last stage is the second form of the stable situation, or the resolution. So we start in equilibrium, go to the disruption, and then end back in equilibrium, where all the problems are resolved. So the disturbance at the beginning of the story create changes for the main characters and set up a goal or objective that the protagonist strives to attain. These narrative questions are answered completely through the ending. So the dramas must be overcome before a new equilibrium can be attained and before the audience can feel narrative closure. So that's basically how beginnings and endings relate to narrative structure and equilibrium and how it all ties together. So.